Hey, what's up, everyone? You're currently tuned into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 in Santa Barbara and KCSB.org. Today, Lietoc and I are joined by composer, improviser for the tenor sax, banjo, amongst other extraneous noises, the one and only Weston Olencki. Weston has been on a tear of sonic manipulations with collaborations with Tongue Depressor and Mattie Barbier, while also recording releases recently for Tripticks Tapes, Longform Editions, and Full Spectrum. Their latest, Pearls Ground Down to Powder, is out now on limited vinyl from Full Spectrum. How you doing, Weston?
What's up?
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's been I know it's the morning there, but I've had a pretty long day already.
Yeah. How's Berlin treating you? What's summer been like over there?
Berlin's good. I just moved apartments, so I've been kind of like resettling.
Yeah.
Like finally have my own place again after a bit.
Sick, dude.
So yeah, I don't know. I made burgers today.
Oh, sick.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, were you doing?
Yeah,
you're doing a little
great.
late
Just
4th of July kind of thing over down there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. It's chill. I'm like the spring was pretty crazy, so I'm trying to take some time, enjoy the new house.
What was going on in spring for you?
Just like life and like everything in general. There's a bunch of projects that were kind of stacked up on top of one another.
Yeah.
So I'm in my studio right now, so I might hit I have like random drums everywhere.
Sick.
But yeah, no, it's just a lot of projects. And like spring, I've been like fully freelancing for, it was a couple years prior to COVID, and then like now a couple years like after the lockdown. And somehow it's like October, November, and like April, May, June are always just like you can't get can't get a breather. And then like summer is like, oh no, there's never ever going to be work ever again.
Yeah.
So
is that
I'm trying to like learn how to enjoy it when it lasts.
Yeah.
So yeah.
When in the work that you're talking about, because those seasons, that sounds really tied to like academics. I'm thinking of finals and kind of the rush of stuff. What freelancing do you do? Is it related to that?
Weirdly enough, I'm a like full-time musician at this point. Mostly I'd say like half of the time, like as a trombonist. Like I'm like a classically trained trombonist.
Yeah.
So I'm like a collaborator on people's projects, or generally like we're doing like live sounds sometimes, or doing like production for people. But yeah, I feel like I'm not doing as much academic stuff as I was like when I was still living in the States, because that's a big part of like, that's where a lot of the money is.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're going to be like for like experimental music, it's usually tied to academic institutions. Over here, it's a little different actually, but it's still somehow it's like, yeah, it kind of falls like September to now July. And then the Europeans love to take their like late July to like late August holiday where like everybody's unreachable and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, so it's a little bit different, but yeah, I think it's just general, like, I don't know, just seems to be the rhythm that we've all inherited.
Yeah.
And there are like festival circuits in the summer, but like generally for what I do, it's pretty sleepy. So.
Sick. I know my friends happen to be in Berlin. Like, I think they're still there right now, but I know they posted a story of like your set, like from a couple of weeks ago with like Matmos or something. Was it Matmos?
Oh yeah. That was Matmos. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They posted like just a story of like your set and Matmos. And I was just like, oh dude, like we're going to plan on talking to Weston soon. And they were like, whoa, what
really
a small
sweet
world. That's insane. We just like went to the show.
That's really sweet.
Because Matmos was playing, and yeah, Weston was sick.
Yeah.
Well, actually, yeah. What was that gig like? Because they just had the Folkaways album, and some of your music can dive or tiptoe into territory around that. So were they kind of asking on you like, hey, you want to like join on this and, play around some more old time music?
I'm not totally sure. I know Martin from a couple of years ago, and like he hosted me my last US tour, like last summer. I played at the Red Room. They had me there. That's where I met Drew finally. I like grew up, I was like 17, and like they were like one of my favorite bands. So it's like it was one of these like, oh, this is sick kind of moments. I think they just were maybe weren't quite sure of how long they would play. Like I know David, the owner of KM, like texted me like 2 weeks before. It's like, hey, have you heard of Matmos? Like, do you want to play the show? I'm like,
yeah.
A, yes, of course I've heard of them. B, they're friends. C, like obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was like a last minute opener type thing, but it was super fun, really friendly.
Well, that's really touching.
I don't think intentional. I think maybe like the folkways thing is definitely there, given like probably our like listening tastes overlap quite a bit in that kind of zone. But I think it was a little more accidental than that.
That's sick. So are you playing like a lot of shows like that out in Berlin, or like what kind of like gigs are you playing mostly?
Fair amount. Maybe at this point I'd say it's like half my own stuff, half kind of either collaborating with or working for other people. So
sick, dude.
Which I feel is a nice balance. Yeah.
I'm just like curious, like what the scene is like in Berlin. Like I went there like a year ago or something like that, just to like visit some friends. But like I really wanted to try and go to like shows and stuff, but like we just didn't have time to. But yeah, I don't know, like what's the scene like over there?
At least there's a lot of scenes, and it's kind of, it's cool for that. And it's a similar density than, because I lived in New York for a long time, and a bit like, and like I've lived in New York, Chicago, San Francisco,
and Vermont,
all around the United States.
Vermont as well.
And Vermont,
wow.
yeah.
Okay,
Vermont was before Berlin. Vermont was kind of the detour that I never thought would happen.
All right,
because of COVID.
So were you always kind of intending though to go to Berlin after New York, and then COVID hit and things were like, okay, we're just going to do a little timeout, and then bam. There we go.
Right. End of a long crazy relationship. I had a feeling that like once the lockdown started, I was like, this ain't going, this ain't like ending anytime soon. Yeah. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to go like basically fuck off to the woods for a while.
That's sick.
And so, it was incredible. It ended up being pretty life-changing. But but like the scene here, it's cool because it's like, it's in the similar way to New York where it's like, oh, like that person lives here. Wait, that person lives here. Like all of these people have either currently lived here, have lived, like people coming through. So it's really amazing for that. It's also quite a quiet city, like in terms of like noise levels and everything. And generally there's a ton of events happening, but you can kind of key in and key out however you want to. Which is for my brain very good, because I get like overstimulated very easily, and like, I feel like so having something where like, oh, if I want to go to like 7 shows in a week, I totally can. But if I want to like, I don't know, sit at home and be a hermit and like, I don't know, make pickles or something, I can also just do that. So, and everyone's like super friendly. Generally things are a bit, at least in kind of the experimental arts, are like pretty well supported. I mean, the funding everywhere is drying up, but it's like definitely there are resources that are available to normal people. And so, generally people are quite friendly and have been very welcoming to me. There doesn't feel to be as much competition. Because everyone's kind of like, oh, like there's very few people here that are actually from Berlin, and very few, and not that many that are from Germany.
Oh, interesting.
At least the people that I'm around. Maybe it's the kind of like the Auslanders stick together type of thing, but it's one of these places that's really a lot of people from a lot of different places. So I'm always like, a bit unsure as to how like actual Berliners feel about that. Because I don't know, I dated somebody who was from New York. Like,
oh, that's crazy, dude.
For a while, and so I got the kind of like a bit of that perspective.
Sick,
at least about New York. So it's the thing where it's like, oh yeah, I'm like not from here, and kind of the stereotype of Berlin, but generally it's been, I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just a lot. It's a crossroads of a lot of different people and a lot of different ideas, and a lot of people that have kind of, I feel like, cut their teeth elsewhere and then come here. So, which is like my story as well. So it kind of feels like a lot of people like, oh yeah, like I have a lot of ideas. I have kind of a very like solid artistic voice, and then you kind of wind up here because you're maybe like a little bit of a misfit somewhere else.
When you were talking about competition there, I mean, is that including like going after grants, booking shows, or kind of like collaborating with people? And in New York, what did that feel like, I suppose?
I mean, New York's got the crazy energy, but it's like no one who's isn't already wealthy can't afford to live there. It's like,
yeah, for sure.
And so here it's getting more expensive very quickly, but it's still like the German way of things is just different. It's like grocery stores are cheap. Then I don't think they ever will not be cheap because enough Germans are going to be like, we need this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just get the feeling that you definitely don't play as much. Like you can't show up here and like play 5 gigs a week. Like that doesn't happen the same way in New York. If you just want to like play and play and play and play and play, you can do that. But here it's a little more like wait your turn, or like, I don't know. I always tell that to friends when they come and try to book, where it's like, oh yeah, like try to book 1 or 2 shows and a lot of people will come to those, but it's kind of not this like shoot your shot everywhere. And then like 2 people show up to that one, 5 people come to that one, 10 people come to that. It's more like, okay, like, go about it that way. Which tends to work pretty well. And I don't know, I'm in my 30s now, and it's kind of like, yeah, I want to like work on something and then show it.
Yeah, just, like, for sure.
Be playing constantly.
Not just like gig constantly. Yeah.
And everyone travels all the time. Yeah. And everyone does gig constantly, but you just can't work in Berlin that much because there's just not enough.
To do
that. So
talking about the travel, you have a great, train network. You've got great rail. You can go different places all across the continent. Sometimes though. Deutsche
Bahn is a mess. And the airport is like famously a wreck.
Oh, really?
But you managed to like it. Yeah, there's a really good podcast called "How to Fuck Up an Airport," which is all about like the building of Brandenburg Airport, which is
that's
an absolute disaster.
Okay, now I'm curious about that.
It's fine. It's fine, and it's like your proximity to everything else, and like kind of how travel funding and stuff works over here. It's like, yeah, it means you get out pretty well.
Sick.
Which is nice. I don't know. I grew up in a tiny town, and it's like I can't believe that I get to like go and like see shit.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Like play music. So it's like I'm just like, yeah, still kind of dumbfounded by that.
What's the coolest place that you've like traveled to recently while you've been out there?
I spent a week in Istanbul last week. Last year, dude. Sorry.
Wow.
Which was really fun.
Yeah.
I spent quite a bit of time in Finland now, like Helsinki and Turku a couple of times. I really like Finland.
So sick.
I'd seen that you had done some shows at Helsinki. That was cool.
Yeah. For like a bunch of different. It somehow ended up I went to Helsinki like 3 times in 1 year, which was really fun.
Oh, that's sick.
I'm going to Morocco next week. So
nice.
That's kind of the new fun one. So
hell yeah.
I'm kind of.
I'm like. I'm from a random tiny town in South Carolina. It's like I'm like this kind of shit blows my mind still.
No, it's funny because who were we talking to last week? Daniel or
I can't remember who it was.
But the individual, he was also from Louisiana, and he was coming out of a small town as well.
Oh, cool.
And then it was like, I had to get out of the South. And then
Byron Westbrook, sorry.
And then Byron finds himself now in like Los Angeles, and it's like, I have no idea how they got to this point still.
Yeah.
But with what you had said here.
Wait, this is Byron Westbrook?
It was Byron Westbrook. Yep.
Is he from Louisiana?
Yeah, he is.
Okay, far out. I didn't know. You keep finding him everywhere. There's like like a tiny circle of us, and it's like like my friend John McCowan was just here. We were recording, and like he's from Carbondale. He's from like outside of Carbondale, Illinois.
Wow.
And like Mattie Barbier is grew up in Lafayette, Louisiana.
Oh yeah.
So it's like there's this like little circle of us who are just like pretty of like kind of the same background too, and it's just like you never thought you'd ever get out of there.
Yeah, right.
But then we're all just like spread out now.
Because originally you've been talking about it, and we kind of been tiptoeing around this. You did grow up in South Carolina, and that's first off, massive state, if I recall. That it's even bigger than
geographically.
North Carolina is bigger.
Tiny.
I'm gonna say North Carolina is bigger, but still.
Yeah. North Carolina is way bigger.
Compared to some of the places you traveled around. But with that,
compared to like Estonia. Yeah.
Yes. That kind of stuff. Again, though, how in small town South Carolina did you inadvertently kind of discover freeform or do it yourself or experimental music? And how did that start pulling you up north?
Or even if it started with like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people start with like playing just in punk bands or like
playing
indie
in a punk
rock
or ska
too.
band.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how did it start for you?
There was like 3 steps maybe. Is that like,
I love it.
One was just like, I was totally the the iTunes LimeWire generation where it's just like downloading, like, I mean, it was like going on like, I remember there was like one very particular moment where it was like going on like the iTunes 20th century music deep cuts playlist and finding like John Cage sonatas and interludes type of stuff. I mean, I came at this very much through classical music first. So it was kind of that. And like, so that, like the trajectory being like classical music into like 20th century classical music. And that's what I studied. And then so kind of came into that as an interpreter of that music. And then through that began like composing and then improvising and then more kind of freeform stuff. And that kind of started when I went to school in Chicago. So there was this like, I was like getting ready to go to Chicago and then discovering all this stuff. And then like kind of was in Chicago when it's like going to like Hungry Brain, like the old Elastic Arts, like the new music scene was like starting to really come up at that point. And so like they kind of like, I was like the 20-year-old and with all these like people in their 30s and like they just kind of like, okay, who's this kid at all these shows? So it kind of came through that. The kind of earlier one, that was like the formal way in which that happened. I still think the earliest way was that like I did drum and bugle corps when I was 14 and 15. So like from a very early age, music became a thing that you didn't necessarily like sit at a desk and think about, but it was like an aerobic thing that you did with your full body. And this is like drilled into me at like 14. And this is what I loved about it, is that it was like, it was basically a sport. And so I think that experience of like precision and virtuosity in this very like kind of like practiced way. And then also just like sheer volume too. Like, I mean, this, like I was in these like DCI level chorus where it's like 120 brass players and you're like one of them.
That's insane. Yeah.
And I'm actually doing a piece about it right now. I have like a bunch of like robotic marching tenors down here that I'm working on.
Oh, wow.
Tight.
But no, it's insane. And it's just like, it's this thing that is more normal than any of this other kind of music. And people are like, yeah, cool. That's just what you do. But it's like, here's a bunch of 18-year-olds like playing as loud as you can in a indoor football stadium. It's crazy. It's genuinely like the sonic phenomenon of that is incredible.
It's not something I think we ever experienced, but when you talk about it traditionally, like, yes, there is a tradition and a reason to do this.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then all of that's kind of like rooted in like, like military music and like American imperialism and all this kind of, it gets really like interesting and really kind of messy. And I'm interested in that stuff. And too, because that's the thing that got me to do music in the first place. So, but I still feel like that experience, both as a player of like really pushing oneself through the music, and then as a listener of just like being like completely like surrounded and enveloped and like in some ways just like, just like thrown into the sound. It's like, it's the same thing with like free jazz and noise and like really hard, like intense, like contemporary classical and like whatever. It's this like kind of ecstatic experience of like sound, and you're just like, we're in it. And so, that I feel like is like the actual, maybe one of the actual seeds that was planted.
A question, at least from that seed, because you talk about the 20th century composer music stuff, the Cage, and then also from there you can get to Lamont, you can go to you can go to the ECM kind of new series stuff with Reich and Glass and even not in Arvo Pärer as well. But like, who are some of your favorite composers from that? And then also, did you read anything like any of like Kyle Gann's writing for the Village Voice or other stuff, that really?
I read all of that.
Yes.
Like really, that was my like 20, that was my like, like kind of how maybe some friends now, it's like their upbringing was, like knowing every punk band and every underground thing or every jazz record. Mine was like, I read everything that I could find.
Yeah.
And like truly like for like maybe about 4 or 5 years, like fully steeped myself in that shit.
Whoa.
So sick.
And so, yeah, I mean, like by the, like I was 23 and I was like going to Darmstadt, like the summer courses, and like won their like interpretation prize playing like the hardest shit I could find. I mean, there's some macho-ness in there that I've kind of soured with and chosen to do differently. But like, yeah, I went very hard and very deep into that thing and then kind of like broke out and pluraled. So it's like still over here, I do that for work. I like made a name early on. But yeah, as far as like composer, I mean, like I'm still a huge Xenakis fan. I love that shit. It's so weird. With this group that I play with here, we got to do my first gig in Berlin. We did Yell On, like the chamber symphony piece at the Berlin Phil.
Oh, sick.
And it's music from like, I think that piece is maybe from like the 70s, maybe 76. I can't remember. But it's like, it's still just like, this is Rico music. Yeah. And it's so strange. And it's so like really, I don't know. I think it's incredible. The
Xenakis stuff is a blast. I've only heard a bit of it because there's a piece on the 3-disc OHM box set, and that is like super great, just critical, you know, like 60, it was like 40s through 70s electronic. But I remember I was at the library once going through a used bookstore and I found a Xenakis CD for $1. I was like, sick, let's go. And then I open it up and I realized he has the San Diego UCSD New Music connection. And I always forget that out on the West Coast, UCSD is kind of it. Like that is still like an actual center for new music and all kinds of stuff. But I remember I rented another CD from the library. I forget the piece. It's one of his drum pieces. I want to say it's like Pledis, PLE.
Is it like... Oh, it's the sextet.
It might be the sextet. I'd have to look. I'll have to send you the photo of it. But as soon as I heard it sounded, I was like, this is Public Image Limited. This is the Flowers of Romance. They're just doing the drum stuff from that. And so the fact that I even had that as like an loved it. Fell in love with that immediately.
Totally.
Big shout out.
Like that kind of, because it's like, for me, it's some things that have stuck around. It's like, it's not necessarily the things that are like, oh, it's all about like classical music. Or it's like, what are the things that are like really about sculpting sound? And so it's like Lachenmann, it's Xenakis, it's like Grisey, like all this like spectral music, all the like crazy like Radulescu, Dumitrescu, all this like Romanian spectral music, all the French stuff, like a lot of the early like acousmatic, like GRM, electroacoustic music. It's things that are really about like sound. And so, yeah, then there's plenty of people also still where there's like Clara Ianota, who's like a very close friend of mine. We've worked together, like, who's like, I still doing like can do stuff with an orchestra that I've never heard before. And it's really amazing. It really just does come down to like, and like the kind of class stuff that's kind of embroiled in that. There's a lot to unpack there and all this kind of thing, but like, and like how the music is made and all the money behind it and all the whole machine of it is like a whole other topic.
That was what I loved about Downtown Music, was when he would go off on those kind of tangents or those moments and really get into a hatred for the academia, or for it's like really like heavily kind of codified new music. The Julius Eastman obituaries really just like it hurts to read, because he saw someone that had like something really great, but just never had the money, never had the resources to do it. And then was like months later, like, we haven't even like, we don't know where Julius is, but like, we can confirm this now. And we're like, just heartbroken. So I see that definitely.
And it's like, stuff. And it's definitely, it feels complicated. It's ambivalent. It was my ticket out. It was my ticket to like the world in a way. And so it's like, it's this thing where, and I'm still in it. And so it's not the thing where I don't have, like, I still am like grateful and I'm still like embroiled in it, but it's definitely like, I feel like my tastes and my interests and my general like working relationships and just being in the world, it's much wider now. I had like a period, like my early 20s, it was very narrow, very focused, like narrow and deep. And then it kind of like split open. And I like being out in the world a little more. But, even though, it's like, there's less money and things are more precarious. But
With that also,
it works better for me.
With that also, I think does come kind of a change in instrument, because you are a multi-instrumentalist. You also do a lot of sort of, but you also do a lot of I mean, you kind of showed us on the side there the stuff that you were doing with the drums briefly.
Yeah.
And looking at some of the stuff in old time music and the latest one you've got here, Pearls. If I recall, it's on old time that you do you use 2 electromechanically controlled banjos. I guess I'm curious about the electromechanical stuff that are just the how you end up rigging that, or how you started to come up with, integrating digital systems or other mechanical stuff analog wise.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, the multi-instrumentalist thing, it's really like, I feel like I play brass instruments and I know how computers work.
Bingo. There we go.
all the multi-instrumental, it is just like, and I've like figured, and so it's like, I did like a flute release, but it's like all the stuff that I like transposed from my brass playing like onto that. So it's not really like, I don't really know how to play the damn thing. Yeah, I mean, so things like that. It was kind of like, once I got out of school, I was like fucking around with like guitar pedals and mixers and like all this kind of stuff, and like had a bunch of friends who were using Max MSP, and I was like, okay, I should just learn this.
For sure.
I was always curious about just like how things are made, so like that's how I like kind of learned how to do like record production. Like that's how I learned to like do all this coding stuff. I got into like, I had like a little foray into modular synths and got back out immediately.
You did not go into the Eurorack. You did not pivot to Eurorack.
I did, and then was just like hit into it, and then was just like, nope.
Was it because like it was too expensive, or like why did you just like
way too expensive?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I feel like I made some decent music, and what it did was like the actual physical synths then made a flip in my brain where it was like then I can just treat actual instruments as if they're like patchable synthesizers. So it's like, it's not just like, here's a violin, but like, here's like this contraption of strings where you can like, if you want to like replace the filter on it, you can then like put some other stuff. I don't know. It's like, or it's like mutes on a brass instrument. It's like the mutes, instead of like, oh, you just put a straight mute on, or you put a plunger mute. It's like, no, the mute actually like is a filter in and of itself, and so you can treat it like a filter.
Wow!
So it's kind of flip of then like treating acoustic instruments like their electronic instruments came from all of that.
Sick.
But the digital system stuff. It was just a lot of they just like being like, hey, can you look at my patch, or like trawling around on forums, or I never took classes in this. And I was playing in a group at the time called Ensemble Pamplemousse. And there's a guy in that, like, they're a bit active still, but I'm still a close friend who teaches now at Peabody. Brian Jacobs, who's like an awesome composer, sound artist, basically was one of the first people that I had seen who like really did a lot of this like electromechanical stuff, using motors, using like, just like has a really incredible knowledge of like, both of electrical engineering, but also like how to actually make music out of that. So he designed some tools. I have some of them here. They're just like these little like.
It looks like a floppy disk. Almost.
Yeah, I mean, or these little like, they're these little chips that's just like have like 12 outputs on them, and then like I code everything in Max myself, but then like they're just like they're voltage gates basically. So then I just send it MIDI, and then. It like can gate and PWM control everything.
So those chips, like you program them in Max MSP, and that's kind of like how like these devices run.
That's how all that works.
Oh, that's pretty sick, dude.
I mean, you can technically send it. They just take MIDI over USB. So Max is just the environment that I know the best.
So what was like I guess the learning curve, like learning like Max MSP? Like I've taught myself like Python and stuff, but I've always like considered like, it'd be kind of sick to like learn like Max or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the thing. It's just, I don't know. It's like an instrument. You just have to practice. You really have to practice it, and you have to spend time with it. And I feel like the thing that worked for me was trying to immediately integrate it into pieces or projects where it's like, oh, like I want like just a sampler. Like, oh, I want to like have a keyboard and just play shit when I press keys.
Yeah.
And like nothing where it's like, I want to make this patch that does everything and everything. It's like, no, actually, like, can it do this and can it play a video at that point? And can it like process my voice at some other point? And like, that's it. And then by doing that, like hundreds of times, basically, at this point, I mean, my like folder is just silly.
That sounds like a
that sounds sick. Like, I feel like that's something I want to like look into. Honestly, sounds like kind of cool. Seems like logical, I guess. You know what I mean? Just like writing a program for anything else. It's just like with music, but yeah.
Totally. That's kind of how I approach it. It's just like, and it's, I mean, I find stuff through the programming of it, but usually it's like, just like, the whole thing is just fuck around and find out.
Yeah.
Really.
Pretty good way to go about for Max.
For sure. Yeah.
From what I've heard.
Yeah. So, it's good. It's a good, I find it to be good because I never really learned, I don't use Ableton. I don't know how to use Ableton.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I do all my mixing in Logic. I do like a lot of my like processing and stuff like through Max and importing. So it's kind of just this like, I'm sure there'd be a much easier way to do it in Ableton, but that's just the way that, I don't know, I've kind of, I can get around that way. So,
yeah. That's
and
it.
it's cool because it's like, it reduces everything to numbers and you just push a bunch of numbers around. And you can turn audio into numbers into audio, like all this kind of stuff. And so it's like, it's this like kind of central hub, usually for like a live set or something like that, where like everything is going into Max and going out of Max. Even if it's just like,
that's wild,
playing samples and stuff like that.
Sick, dude.
So you see, the thing about all the stuff with Max MSP and all the sound that we're talking is that, I mean, it does play a big role into, I think, what makes a lot of your music such a blast to visit and get back to. You once said there's very little, quote, stuff that you've done, but you did say, I'm interested in sharing an ecstatic, focused experience of sound and time, and its intense, dense, and very physical reality. How it shapes us, moves us, recalibrates our bodies and minds. When we do this conversation, I think that's being, again, kind of like doubly confirmed, but it really sounds like a major MO to the music that you've been working on this decade, specifically stuff that isn't about the brass, but really it's about the banjo. And you've been exploring, we'll put in quotations exploring, but I think these are phenomenal recordings on Southern music.
Oh, thank you.
Really. And the first one I got clued into, that would have been last year when Dinzu Artifacts had sent me the Tongue Depressor tape that you were on. And I was like, oh, cool. What's this guy do? Like, who's Tongue Depressor? And then being like, oh, and Weston's here also doing this. And then I realized the Tripticks Tapes release, which I had missed, and I got to go and pick up because that also plays a big role into this. But what pushed you over specifically to the banjo and kind of got you in contact with like Tongue Depressor on one side, but also really interested to dive into kind of playing with the instrument almost as like a time travel machine, I would say.
Totally. 100%. Yeah. So in short, the Tongue Depressor thing, I've known Zach since like 2016. I've known about Henry for just as long. Like, they're old friends. And when I was I knew them before I moved to New England, and like, that was just one of the things was like living in New England. It's just like, all right, y'all, like, let's just like do something. Because we've like, just known each other for a long. We like kind of came up around the same time. We're all the same age.
Sick.
But the whole banjo thing. There was maybe like two parts to that, where one was I was working on, there's a project that I've done with this British composer, Sam Salem. He runs pretty low under the radar, especially in like North America. But he's a very close friend of mine. He does like really amazing work about like kind of psychogeographies of place.
Oh,
so it's like going somewhere and taking tons of recordings and taking all this material and then kind of forming this like, not opinion, but just forming this like making work out of that, basically.
Because I think about not to interrupt there, but like Andrew Weathers does that. And then also like I've brought up the term to other people, like sonic road mapping, and it really sounds like just
like it's an old like Neil Lockwood, like it goes like Neil Lockwood, Pauline Oliveros goes like farther back. Too.
Absolutely.
So I was doing this project with Sam that we did because he's normally like made a piece about Stockholm. What about Amsterdam? He lives in London, but his family's from Jordan and Palestine. Has like made some stuff like about that and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But we did a project together where I was like, what if you came to my hometown? And I just never thought, it's like, I went to conservatory in Chicago and then in San Francisco. I feel like and I was always like running away from where I was from. And there was some shame about it too, of like, yeah, like I showed up in Chicago and I had kids from like the New York Youth Symphony, like making fun of me because I couldn't pronounce like classical music terms.
Yeah.
Like, stuff like that. I mean, it's whatever. I don't give a shit anymore. But it is like a lot of stuff where it's in like the kind of general stigma still with like a lot of like, like the image of the South to this country and to the world too. I get it from Europeans still. It's like, oh, it's so unsafe. And it's just like, come on, y'all. Like, like get on yourself. And so like I was doing this project with Sam, and this was like in 2017 that we started. And so it was like, yeah, like the first time where it's like, oh, like, what about where I'm from? Like I just never thought about it. And then later that year, my mom passed away, and it was a kind of a complicated relationship and all this stuff. And it was the main reason why I kind of like run farther and farther from home. But then I started to spend a lot more time back there with my dad and like just kind of general family stuff. And just was like, okay, like what actually is my relationship to this place? Like it's the thing where wherever we're from, it's like we're inextricable from that. We're inextricable from its histories, and that's like that's the hand that we're dealt. Like you don't get to choose that one. But it's a part of you, whether you like it or not. So it's the thing of like I could keep running from this, or I could start to try to learn about it. And so, it was kind of those two things. And then, like a couple of years later, I just had this like image of like these two banjos that were like self-resonating and like able to like be like basically turning this big percussion instrument into like a drone synth.
Oh, wow.
And then sort of just get into all this stuff. Did a brief stint in art school and then dropped out of that. But then all this kind of then like getting into just like, like ways of, I mean, I've always been interested in like history and research and like musical material. And then it was like, this was a way, the old time release was a way to like, and maybe actually it was that one. And then there was the Super Fang release before that called Verdmont, which were like the ones that kind of were like, okay, how do I bring these together? Of like, not just like, there's not just the music that's happening, but then there's also like this other narrative that's a part of it of like, where do all of these sounds come from? What's it all referencing? What, like, how did the piece actually get made? And what's the story that's told through all of these things being kind of in contact with one another? So with the banjo, it's like naturally like the radio and the railroad, as like the way in which the origins of country music are spread. So then what do all of these sounds have to do with one another? And so that was kind of the, maybe one of the seeds of thinking with that one is just like, okay, like this instrument has kind of borne witness. The banjo has borne witness basically to the birth of the entire myth of what we think of as America. Because it was brought over from West Africa into the Caribbean, was only an instrument played by like enslaved people down there. And then brought up here. White folks never touched it. It was like then built up in all of this crazy racism and all this like crazy systemic violence. And then through that, I mean, and then through the minstrelsy, and then through how does it get codified as like a rural white mountain people
for
thing.
sure. It's insane.
And so it's basically like, and there's a couple really amazing books about this, but the honest history about the fact that this instrument does not come from here either. And then just it's seen America.
For sure.
It's seen the birth of this thing that has been, I don't know, that's the whole propaganda of creating a country.
Now it's making me think of like the Smithsonian Anthology, and it's been a second since I visited some of those discs and some of the banjo cuts, but just what you say about it being like a white appellation, that kind of, it got codified into that when it's very clearly not. It's always something worth. It's always something just to consistently think back on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually never knew the history behind the banjo and stuff.
I mean, this is very condensed and very like generalized, but it's the whole and it's the history of like white culture being born out of like African American culture, like all of this, and like and culture from everywhere too. It's like, and then kind of this like, I don't know, just these myths that we and governments like to tell us.
I'll have to look for these books. If you have a name or a recommendation for them, I would gladly take it.
That'd be sick.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like I mean, Rhiannon Giddens has been like in the news a lot. Like a lot of her research made a big impact. There's like, what's his name? Cedric Watson is like a Creole like banjo player down in Louisiana. Really amazing. There's a couple. I think I can't remember who wrote it. It's just a book called Banjo. It's came out the last couple of years.
I'll find that.
I can remind me and I'll email it to you. But yeah, and there's a couple scholars from like the 70s too that were like the first people to be like, no, wait, like where did this actually come from?
Sick. Yeah.
But yeah, and then just like, through all of this, getting kind of owning the fact that I'm from there. And like, and it's now a thing where like I don't feel, I mean, there's obviously like a very messy and ambiguous and ambivalent kind of relationship to that past, given how like absolutely awful and like and like I'm entangled in it, like whether I like it or not. But like it's the thing now where it's like I'm like there's a certain pride in it, and just like no, like I'm from there, and like this project and like kind of that awareness that maybe got filtered into the project really, helped that come about.
Yeah.
It's a good way of putting it, because there are different shades to each of the recordings as well. Each of them, I think, shows a different side about how you're really contemplating the banjo, or also looking at other brass instruments or other technologies you look at with them. I've got like the liner notes pulled up for old time music right now, and I'm looking at the by and by, and that's a super fascinating piece that, it's kind of gone under the radar that like you used open AI jukebox stuff here in a really great way. I think that speaks to like a good potential for this technology as a tool to make pieces like this that you can contemplate and reflect that identity within. But then also, we hadn't brought it up yet. The piece you did for Longform Editions this year is like stone cold heater. And one of the things I love about the piece is the starts and the stops. You really, give those moments where it's like, okay, we can go somewhere else now. And I think it also plays in a bit to that time travel angle that you get in playing with this instrument. But with Longform's Editions, like, how did that all kind of come to be? Did they get in touch with you? And then what were you thinking as you were putting it together?
I mean, that one, Jules actually put us in touch.
Sick.
And and they were open to the submission. I mean, I just submitted it to them. That one, it was, I tried to make it for a live performance with this group Compliments that I used to play with. It didn't quite work as a live piece. Because it was also like, it was like a bunch of player, and it like, it just never, we did it a couple times and I was like, this doesn't quite, like, I'd always imagined this just a recorded piece. I think, I mean, that one's just like, I just got obsessed with those Balfour Brothers CDs. Like true. Like, I mean, all of this stuff is that like, I just like scour around, or people show me stuff, or like all this kind of, and I just get like fixated on stuff. And then I'm like, okay, like there's something in this. There like that one was just interesting because it's like the instrumentation of all of the Cajun music. It's like, it's so different than Appalachian music, and obviously the histories are different. And like, I know I'm a bit of an outsider with that. But I just got really obsessed with that, and then was just like messing around with stuff and slowing recordings down. Which is the thing I've been doing more. I did a little bit on the old time release. The ending of the long form one is like, is that actual song that's just like time stretched and mucked around with.
Good call.
I have an LP coming out next year that's kind of a follow up to old time. That like tons of it is all just this like actually taking like all like banjo players from like the 30s and stuff, and taking those recordings and pulling them out and turning them into like synth pads and all this kind of stuff. Because it's just like the recording quality and like the way in which like the grit of the actual instruments moves. If you take that and blow it open by like 20, like you play it like 20 times slower or something like that. There's all of this like weird harmonic nuance in there that I just think is really cool.
Wow.
But yeah, it was like I was interested in this music, and then I was like, I know there's something about the triangles that really like stuck with me. Just like to use a triangle as like as a drum set, basically.
No one's doing it. We got to get back into that.
It's really strange. But then like I love like high, bright. I like overtone rich things, and so I was like, oh, I'm gonna build a machine and robotically play the triangles, and then I like bought. There's this cheap like instrument company here called Tomon, and I like was like, okay, like it's $50. I'll buy like 10 triangles. Like why not?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And then they came in the mail, and I picked them up all at one time, and it made like that's the sound at the end is me playing the fiddle. It's 8 copies of me, but playing the fiddle with like 5 triangles on my hand.
That's so sick.
And so it creates just this like, I mean, it's really hard to play, but it like fully like, I don't know. It was this cool like constraint thing.
Yeah.
Wow. No, that just sounds like a heater track to come down.
It was fun. Yeah, but no, the thing about the form, like, yeah, I'm happy that you picked up because it was this like, this kind of starting and stopping of like, oh, you can go here, you can go here, you can go here. It was imagine this kind of like, the thing that you finally the hole that you finally fall down into is like one of many.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you are searching for something, and then you kind of stumble into this like underground world in a way.
That's sick.
There's a couple of things I guess I'll play off of that because you bring up the triangles, just like, hey, got to pull this in. Is there any other kind of major pieces of gear that you've wanted to work with that kind of by serendipity you integrated, or something you just thrifted or found? And then there's something else I'll kind of ask off of that. But if there is,
I do the thrifting thing. I do a lot.
We love our thrifters.
I mean, I mean, one of the banjos on that record, and kind of the thing that got it started, is that I had an ex-partner who was a guitar tech and a really great improviser. And they found one of those banjos in a Goodwill in Connecticut. And it was just like, hey, I found this for $50, and I was just like, all right, here it goes. This new LP that I was mentioning to, it's like so it's basically I did this tour in the South last summer. Like I did a residency for a month in Chattanooga, and then 3 weeks, and it was like 14 shows all south of Baltimore.
Sick.
And so playing like freaking music, I don't know. It's like the fact that I can do that. It's like blows my mind.
Also, wait, playing
it's not a thing that was even conceivable growing up.
I was wondering because you bring up some of the stuff you played at. Have you ever been contacted by Big Ears? Because it seems like this music's like straight in the wheelhouse for the
I'd love to.
Big Ear Zone, yeah.
I'd love to.
I might have written your name on the feedback card. I wrote a lot of names down because I was like, they just need to get these people. We got to get them.
Oh, thanks.
So if anyone from Big Ears,
I mean, I'd love to. Yeah, I've played Knoxville like 3 times, but never. Yeah, always like smaller stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this record, I basically like collected instruments all on tour. I was going to thrift shops all the time, and the whole record kind of came about because it was just like it was the longest I'd been back in the South since I left. It was just like I don't know. I was like on tour, but I was still like taking like 3 hours of field recordings a day and like driving around, and like I mean I was like eating my weight in barbecue. It was awesome.
So sick, yeah.
And like just like going like I don't know, I'd like me on the road. It's like I wake up at 7 and I like drive all day. And it's like I really like travel when I'm touring. It's like I'm like seeing stuff and then I play.
That's
shows.
Cool. Yeah, that's sick.
And I like play the shows so that I can see stuff too.
That's cool. I feel like that's the ideal way to tour.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice also because you're one person band here doing that, so you are able to go around. There's no one else you're waiting on. You say, "Hey, I'm getting up at 7." Okay, you're out. You're packed, and I can just imagine. Yeah, that's the way to do it.
And like this whole record is all of that. So there's like I found like all of these chromatic harmonicas in I think a town called Horse Cave, Kentucky.
Wow.
Like all those like button harmonicas. So there's a bunch of that on there.
So sick. Yeah.
There's an auto harp that I found in Sevierville, Tennessee, Dolly Parton's hometown.
Oh, wow.
I swear it was sitting in this junk shop for like 50 years. It smelled like it.
Yeah.
But the tuning on it, because it was basically like it had been tuned up probably in like the 80s. And then like those things just fall out of tune. And then I like started to bow it. And it was just like the entire, like the first half of the B-side on this new record is just all the tuning that it was found in.
Sick.
And so, which is, like a cool thing. Cause I do a lot of like microtonal music and stuff and thinking about like, rather than like just intonation and like rational harmony, rather than being this like thing that you think about, it's like, no, wait, this is also just like entropy. Like entropy on like a junk instrument can also turn into like brainy my personality stuff.
I like that.
But so there's that. I mean, like, it's all, I mean, there's like recordings of like looms that I've recorded, like the Foxfire Museum in like Mountain City, Georgia. Like it's all
sick.
found.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so the instrument thrifting and just the general, just like I just collect shit.
Yeah.
I really I don't know. My dad's the same. My dad's like a bit of he was like a commercial photographer, and he's has storage units full of stuff.
Yeah. It happens.
And I feel like I inherited that. I just like collect stuff.
Yeah. So, you're back. I guess, what have you collected in like Berlin at all? If you collected any like sick instruments over there from like your travels in like Europe or anything?
Yeah.
Not as much. That's been the thing. I've been kind of wondering when, like, because it's really tied to, I think, America.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know.
That's fine. It's fine though, because I just read a recent collection of short stories about collectors, and it was like a young adult like collection, but I think it did a really great job. And some of my favorite stories in that came down to the like extreme limits people set on collecting. These are like little fictional stories, but like the one kid who has to basically collect things he steals from other people he knows collections.
Okay.
But then he does but will not steal or take a note out of their partners. Like little like note box, which I think was like really sweet. Or like the one about these kids in 70s LA who collect great pools. Empty pools that they can skate in, because skate parks don't exist yet. So they're just looking around these neighborhoods to figure out when people are out and they can just go and hang. So you saying like my collection is tied to America, and this it makes sense.
I think so.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I've been collecting rocks since I was 4.
Yes.
So I have rock. I bring rocks from like little tiny, but like from like everywhere that I go, basically.
Cool.
Which I've literally done since I was 4.
Since I was probably about that age, maybe a little bit older, I've collected stick guns, and it's just sticks around. It's like, it's not a family that was like big on the Second Amendment, but I was like, oh, this stick looks like a Thompson machine gun. Let's pick it up. And so just for years, I had randomly collected across UCSB or local park or just stuff on our property that I'm like, that's a cool science fiction ray gun. That's a cool thing. Lost a ton of them a couple years back, but I still have a pretty sizable collection that I'm like, it's okay.
Sick.
Nice.
It's just like a natural thing. And then, I remember being like, oh, it's cool. This is my own thing. And going to an art museum and seeing someone else in the 60s having already done this. Being like, sick, but mine's better. With some of the music that you've brought up here as well, kind of a two-faceted, because also that's just something I guess you've I don't know if you have a giant physical media collection, but at least mentally and digitally, huge.
Mentally,
You've been building up some stuff. So I'm curious on a new music, on like a 2023, 2024 in your neck of the woods with collaborators, stuff that really thrills you or that you're looking forward to. And then on this classic side, this kind of pre-50s, let's say, with compilations or other stuff, what also thrills you there? Because I love to search for a lot of music like that, and I go to libraries and get the Smithsonian sets or old Rounder CDs or Rhino comps, but that only really, I feel now like you're barely scratching the surface with that.
Right.
So if anything comes to mind, hell yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
This is always the hardest question of the show.
Maybe older classic stuff. Maybe I'll start with. I've been pretty deep into like Cape Breton fiddling, which is maybe more like 80s, 90s than like pre-50s, but it's
Who
still
cares?
like,
That's good.
Yeah, like a lot of Cape Breton fiddling. My partner's just showing me a bunch of like Gnawa music.
Oh, sick!
Like I've fully gone down that.
Gamelan, yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Gamelan always. I mean, that's it's the front ensemble. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the like just like tons of keyboard percussion. It's fascinating. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I've been listening back through, like, I don't actually know a lot of the old, like, Ethiopiques collection, so I've been, like, going back through most of those records, which has been a lot of fun.
Sick.
I feel like I've been interested in a lot more of just, like, like, really rhythm-forward music, and, like, kind of trance-inducing rhythm-forward music.
Okay, I see what yeah.
And so,
no, we had just seen Horse Lords last night, and I think that's a great example of like, hey, here's another Berlin-based, trance-inducing, rhythm-based band. And God, when they got on the drums,
I was listening through that earlier today. The studio actually, Max and Owen from Horse Lords are two really close friends. I actually shared the studio with Max.
Oh wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
We should have said something. We should have.
It's a very small world.
We gotta talk with them.
Weirdos who are interested. Oh, you are.
Well,
no, I was gonna say we got to. Yeah, at some point we should.
Okay. Yeah.
I gotta say, their main guy, who the main guitarist, I think is hysterical.
I think he so funny on stage. Yeah,
I think he has incredibly good banter, but also I find the driest stuff incredibly funny usually.
Yeah, yeah, he was funny.
Owen's a sweetheart. He's like your favorite math teacher.
He really is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for newer stuff, I'm still like always obsessed with Horse Lords.
Horse Lords are amazing. That was my first time seeing them last night. Yeah,
they were part of the reason I went to Big Ears this year, and then it was like, you know what, I want to go back up and see them. And I would say this once they got the sound, because the first cut had terrible sound. Drums were muddy. Something was wrong on the opener, and then they had to run down there. They fixed it up, and it was killer. Also, Andrew did. He had a solo. He did one of his pieces, I think, or he just got like a little 4-minute.
Oh, really?
3-minute or so, because he did the sax.
Oh yeah. Cool.
But they play it. It was longer than Big Ears. It was a bit looser, I would say, and then they also cuts just went into one another. Felt really
it was sick.
Cohesive. Hell yeah.
Yeah, no, they're great. Yeah, I feel like honestly, recently I've been mostly just listening to like older music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sick.
I mean, like I mentioned John McCallum, like it was like just here. We recorded a new record for a piece of his. His stuff is incredible. Clarinetist from Illinois, now based in Iceland. Yeah, there's like a couple things in the works, but it's mostly just been like listening to old recordings in my kitchen. I feel like that's what I've done for like 3 weeks. And so, like listen to a bunch of stuff that I feel like, because I feel like, with like my background, it was like very, I like went narrow and deep into a certain thing. And now it's like, okay, like what else is like, I don't know, kind of catching up on a lot of things. Because I really feel like maybe everybody feels like this. It's just like, like 0.001% of stuff. And it's like there's so much out there. And it's really
for sure. Like, it's like endless, you just fall into like an endless.
I need to study.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's a thing too, where it's like, I was like writing a lot and like composing a lot since January, like up until like the end of May. Yeah. And I usually don't like listen when I'm writing. So
I get what you mean.
I feel like now I'm like catching up with all my friends' records.
Exactly.
So
sick.
I think it's a great way of putting it. And then also, I mean, at least with the albums you've done as well, because you're consistently looking ahead to other stuff, and it's like the one that you have on Full Spectrum that's coming from 2 summers ago, 2 very hot summers back in New York City. And even now, with this album, is there anything that really comes to mind for that, or do you think you've kind of evolved upon?
You mean like future stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been interested in like still having a lot of the narrative stuff, but kind of actually really just like focusing more and more on music and like intuitive things and like less kind of justifying everything.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the like, oh, I just froze. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
You're all good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know. It's the thing I'm kind of now like doubled down on like instruments again, where it's like I've been writing for like instruments. Even made a couple scores for the first time in a long time.
Oh, sick. Yeah.
Yeah, but not in a way of like making it like new music-y. But it's just like, no, like this is just the yeah. I did a collaboration with Talk Ensemble in New York.
Oh,
like,
nice.
We're
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, and that was kind of the last big thing. So that'll come out at some point. But yeah, it's just been like, I don't know, I've been thinking about like orchestration and like really boring shit like that. Yeah, I think the big thing is like more of this kind of music driven, intuitive way of working. It's not as much like, about clever things or like kind of like, I know it's just like actually where is the music leading and like what like what's it doing without you having to like necessarily talk about it.
That's beautiful. And I guess, I mean, again,
like I think the liner notes for this next record, I think I'm going to draw a map.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, yes.
So yeah. And just like, there'll be like 2 lines of text and I'm just going to draw a hand-drawn map.
Dude, that's so sick. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the 2025 map era.
Yeah, dude.
When you start thrifting Randy McNally atlases. I forget what that is. I work in a library and I got one of those recently. I was like, yeah, these are legit.
Yeah, old maps are sick.
Yeah, they're crazy.
Oh my God.
I mean, I'm also obsessed with maps. That's the other thing.
Oh, really? Cool.
But yeah, the craziest one that I found, and this is like one of the only ones that I have, but I was on tour, I was in Riga, Latvia, and there's a map shop there.
Oh, wow. That is super niche, but sick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a famous, because they acquired all of the contents of the old Soviet,
wow,
like the old Soviet occupation. When I think they left in like 1990 or something.
Yeah.
Or 1991. And the Soviet military made maps of every corner of the globe. And I found an original one of the quadrant that includes Knoxville, Spartanburg, Greenville, and it's like all in Cyrillic. And I have a map from like Russia. I mean, or like from Latvia, basically. Yeah. That's like above my desk. That's like, like my hometown as like seen from the other side of the planet.
Dude, that is so wild. Yeah. Like I would have never really thought. Yeah. Would have never really thought about really like bizarre. The Soviet Union mapping out the United States, but I guess they would have done that, right?
They would just have to.
I mean, like down to like where the airports were. It's crazy.
Makes sense. That is really
I can find the street that my dad's house is on.
Wild.
In this tiny town of like 25,000 people. Yeah, it's crazy.
That's sick. Yeah, old maps are cool.
So it's like it's our like sense of place in the world.
For sure. Yeah, I have like dove into old maps a good amount as well. On like the USGS website, you can find like their old like maps all the way down from like the early 1900s, like when the government first started mapping like out like the US and stuff. And you can also get like, I make maps like professionally for like my job, or I just work with like geospatial data. But like,
seriously?
Yeah. And so,
okay, that's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty sick. And anyways, like what I like to do, or what I was doing for a while just for fun, I was taking like these old like USGS maps, and then like they have like, you know, elevation data for like the entire country that you can like download for free. Yep. So I was like taking like the elevation data and then like putting it in a way that like this 3D like art program called Blender would understand. And so I would basically make like a 3D model of like, you know, with this like, elevation data, and then overlaying a vintage map onto it. And then you have like this 3D vintage. It looked really sick. It's cool.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
But anyways, if you feel like looking for cool maps on the USGS website, it's all there.
I am probably going to do that tonight.
So, also, I'll give a shout out because I forget how I had found it. Random libraries will have random digital special collections that can contain old maps of, you know, it was like I found like my hometown Escondido circa 1900 and just like the general plan
it's
for
sick.
how it looked in 1900 and it's going to be these 5 streets with a bank, and it's like okay, we've come a long way, but so never forget about those random library resources. You just have to trawl around and figure out those special collections, but if you can navigate weird HTML websites, you're in.
Sweet. Yeah, because it's really, I mean, these things, like especially how people viewed these things in the past, and just like, I don't know. There's something to it's like when I was like living in New England, I was like going to weird local museums or going to weird like town hall type thing. It's just like, I don't know, just seeing how people reflected and like conceptualized of their environment and like how we do that now and like where that might be going. It's really, it's fascinating. And like,
sick.
I don't know why I'm talking.
Yeah,
that's just this is all like 100% cool.
Yeah,
I
in like
love
the
it.
most like nerdy way.
No, it all plays out. I mean, this is why we do this.
Yeah,
because I don't know, it's going to make little synapses fly off for me next time I visit some of the music and hopefully get a chance to write about it. Seriously.
Okay. No, thank you. Seriously.
So, I guess does that kind of bring us to the end here?
I think we've pretty much had a pretty good Stone Cold classic.
Yeah. So I guess where can people keep up with all things Weston?
I've got a Bandcamp. That's my name at Bandcamp. I'm on Instagram, even though it's not on my phone anymore, but it's stuff's there.
Yeah. Sick.
I have a website. I mean, normal website, Instagram, Bandcamp.
You got an email on that website?
Like most stuff. Yeah. Emails on the website. I don't know. Feel like
cool. Do you want to ask the last question, Mattie?
I'll give this a go. This is a really important.
Yeah, it's kind of like the biggest one of the show.
Oof. Okay, so let's give a sense. You're going to Morocco next week, right? Yes. Okay, so you make it big in Morocco. You head over to the thrift shop, and oh man, look at that! There's a giant wall of banjos. You find a great banjo, just the one that you've been looking for. But unfortunately, it's the home for a little white lab rat. This dude's a little scared right now, Weston, that you're shaking his home, and he's gonna jump in your mouth. But you get to determine if it's head first or butt first, and why. And again, this is a good guy, so be kind.
Oh, I don't have a choice.
You do not have a choice.
It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen for sure. But
I'm on. Okay.
It's kind of a doozy.
I mean, my like instinct is just like leave him alone.
Unfortunately, you picked up this banjo, and this is happening.
I picked it up. Okay. All right. But first, get it out. Just get the worst part out of the way.
Yeah, I respect that. Yeah, and then just like let him
just get it out of the way.
Logically, he's gonna hop out quicker. You know what I mean? Like it's just exactly. Yeah.
I really respect the amount of silence, the pause that was needed for this. I know this was a shocking question, but I think you gave
really it's specific.
It's
very very niche, very specific question. But you handled it, Weston.
And the rat respects you.
You saved the rat's life.
Great.
That's
all I want.
And a lot of people don't tend to preserve the rat's life, and so that's very nice.
He's your street team in Morocco now.
I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be fine regardless. So.
Yeah,
and he will too.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's kind of all we have for today. Thanks for tuning into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 every Sunday 4 to 6 p.m. And KCSB.org to the rest of the world. It's been Weston Olencki. Thanks so much for being on the show, Weston. It's super fun.
Thanks for having me.